I was born an affair child. I've only known contempt my whole life. I sat at the table with them, but I still couldn't join them. I opened the door to them, but they just stared in disdain. I can only look through the window from outside at them, at their perfect family. They were everything I wanted, and I was everything they hated. My father cheated on his wife with my mom, who died at childbirth, and I've been raised by him, his wife, and children. It was not a pleasant experience. I closed the door quietly behind me. Their laughter from the dining room faded into the silence of my world. My footsteps echoed on the cold tiles as I retreated to the tiny room at the back of the house, my corner of shame. The walls were bare, save for the single cracked mirror that mocked me with my reflection. I dropped onto the mattress on the floor, the springs creaked beneath my weight. In the faint light streaming through the window, I traced the scar on my forearm, a memento from when their eldest son pushed me into the glass door. They called it an accident. He didn't even apologize. I heard them call her perfect, their real daughter. I heard their pride, their love, their acceptance in every word. I always sat quietly, clutching my hands in my lap, eyes downcast, too afraid. I knew my place in their life, and it was beneath their servants. School was no escape. They knew who I was. The whispers followed me down the hallways. A fair child. Mistake. The words wrapped around me, heavy chains dragging me further into the abyss. The teachers looked at me like I was a ticking time bomb, like I'll crumble under the weight of my disgrace and bring shame to their classrooms. I worked twice as hard, hoping they'll see me as something more. I studied late into the night, scribbling answers in dim light, but my grades were never good enough. The teachers praised my sister instead. She's the shining star, while I'm the shadow no one wants to acknowledge. I don't cry anymore. Tears make no difference. Instead, I've learned to bottle it all up. Every insult, every slight, every moment of neglect. It's the only way to survive. But survival comes at a cost. My chest feels like it's caving in every night, the pain sharp and unrelenting. They take family photos without me. I'm always conveniently out of frame, standing just to the side, holding the camera, watching them smile like I don't exist. They frame the pictures, hang them on the walls, and leave me erased from their narrative. When they celebrate, I'm the one clearing plates and wiping spills. When they grieve, I'm the one blamed for their misery. My very existence is a stain they can't wash away, a reminder of what they refuse to forgive. At night, I stare at the stars through the cracked window. I wondered if there's a place where I belong, a place where I'm not the mistake in someone's story. But the stars never answer. They just shine, indifferent to my pain, just like the rest of the world. The mornings were the worst. I wake up before everyone else to clean the house. It didn't matter if I was sick or exhausted. They expected the floors to gleam and the laundry to be folded by the time they woke up. If I'm too slow, my stepmother stands over me, her voice sharp and grating. "This is all you'll ever be good for," she always says, handing me another load of clothes. I never respond. I've learned that words only make it worse. At school, I always sit alone during lunch. I hear them talking about me, even when they try to whisper. Her father's mistake. Her mother's shame. The words cut deep, but I pretend not to hear. When they trip me in the hallway, spilling my books across the floor, I just scramble to pick them up. No one helped. They never do. When I got home, my sister was in the living room, surrounded by shopping bags. She showed off her new clothes, her new shoes, her new everything. "Don't you wish you had nice things like me?" she said with a smirk, holding up a pair of designer heels. I didn't respond. I know if I do, she'd find a way to twist it into an argument, and I'd be the one blamed for disrupting the peace. Dinner is another ordeal. I sit at the far end of the table, barely touching my food. They talk around me, their voices loud and cheerful, as though I'm not even there. When my stepmother makes a comment about my silence, my sister laughs. My father does nothing. She's just sulking. She's always sulking. I clenched my fists under the table, nails digging into my palms. I wanted to scream, to tell them I was not sulking, I was suffocating. But I didn't. Instead, I excused myself and left the room, their laughter following me down the hallway. I thought about running away, but where would I go? I was too afraid to leave this house, too dependent on the scraps they threw at me. Sometimes I sneak out late at night. I walk to the park and sit on the swings. It's the only place I can breathe, the only place I can cry without fear of being hurt. One night, I came home to find my stepmother waiting for me. She doesn't say anything at first, just stands there with her arms crossed, her eyes cold and calculating. "Where were you?" she finally asks. "At the park," I say, my voice barely above a whisper. She steps closer, her face inches from mine. "Do you think this is a hotel? Do you think you can just come and go as you please?" "I'm sorry," I say, even though I'm not. She slapped me, the force of it knocking me back against the wall. "You're lucky we even let you stay here," she says. "Don't forget where you come from." As if I could ever forget. The house was silent the morning the call came. My stepmother answered the phone, her usual sharp tone softening into something almost unrecognizable. She hung up, her eyes gleamed, as she turned to us. "Your grandfather, he's gone," she said. The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. The rest of them murmured their condolences, but I stayed silent. I barely knew the man. He'd visited once when I was a child, a stern, quiet figure who barely looked at me. The week that followed was a whirlwind of preparations for the funeral. My stepmother and her children treated it like a social event, ordering expensive outfits and rehearsing their mournful expressions. I was instructed to stay out of the way, as usual. The day of the funeral was cold and gray, fitting for the occasion. The church was packed with people I didn't recognize, all there to pay their respects to the man they claimed to love. I sat at the back, alone, watching as my father and his family took their places at the front, their heads bowed in mock grief. After the service, we gathered at the family estate for the reading of the will. I wasn't expecting anything. Why would I? To them, I wasn't family. I was just the shameful product of an affair, an outsider with no claim to their legacy. The lawyer entered the room, a man in his 60s with a no-nonsense demeanor. He opened the envelope with practiced precision and began reading aloud. "To my wife, I leave $10,000 as a gesture of goodwill, despite her infidelities." The room erupted in shocked whispers. My grandmother's face turned crimson, her lips pressed into a thin line. "To my children, I leave $5,000 each as they are not of my blood." The whispers grew louder, turning into outright protests. My father and his siblings looked at each other in disbelief while my stepmother screamed out obscenities. "What is this?" she demanded. "This has to be a mistake." The lawyer ignored her and continued, handing over the DNA tests to my father and his siblings. After reading it, they lashed out at their mother, who just sat there sobbing her eyes out. My stepmother and step-siblings all looked like they wanted to cry, their only source of livelihood taken away from them. As for me, I just sat there, enjoying the scene. The lawyer hushed all of them before continuing reading the will. "To my only biological heir, the daughter of my late daughter, I leave the remainder of my estate, $500 million, along with the family estate and all associated assets." Whispers filtered through the room, all wondering who she was. The lawyer continued, "Her name is Chloe Daniels." The room fell into stunned silence. Every pair of eyes turned to me, the girl they had spent years ignoring, belittling, and abusing. "No," my stepmother whispered, her voice trembling with fury. "This can't be. She's nothing. She doesn't deserve this." But the lawyer remained firm. "The will is clear. Chloe Daniels is the rightful heir." "How?" my father asked, shocked. The lawyer cleared his throat. "Apparently, Mr. Daniels decided to have his own affair, and that resulted in Miss Daniels' mother, who then had an affair with you." "You bastard!" my stepmother screeched as she attacked my father. "How many times will you ruin my family?" Everything was in a blur. I just sat there. Finally, I could escape all of them. Regardless of the noise, the lawyer continued, "As Miss Daniels has 6 months to be of age, I, Rupert Donald, will be handling the estate until she is of age." The days that followed were a blur. Suddenly, the people who had treated me like dirt were falling over themselves to win my favor. My stepmother tried to apologize, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. My half-siblings, once cruel and dismissive, now called me sister as if the word had ever held meaning for them. The time came and I was of age. Everyone buttered up to me, but I didn't forget. I didn't forgive. The money, the house, the power, it didn't erase the years of pain, the nights spent crying myself to sleep, the scars both visible and invisible. I was rich, but I was still the affair child, still the girl they hated. And I would carry that with me forever, while rich, of course. 2 years had passed since I inherited the fortune, and my life was unrecognizable. I had power now. One afternoon, my secretary entered and informed me that my stepmother and half-siblings were waiting to see me. When they entered, they looked nothing like the polished, entitled family that once mocked my existence. They looked tired. They hesitated in the doorway, unsure of how to approach me. Finally, my stepmother stepped forward. Her hands trembled as she clasped them together. Their apologies were drenched in desperation. They pleaded for forgiveness, requested for my help. Our father was dying of stage 4 pancreatic cancer, they explained, and the treatments had drained their finances. They had sold most of their valuables, yet it wasn't enough. "Thank you for coming," I said, walked past them as they called after me, but I didn't stop. My father was a shadow of the man I remembered, thin, pale, and frail. Tubes and wires surrounded him, the machines keeping him alive. When he saw me, his eyes filled with tears. He confessed that he hadn't known of my existence until my grandfather brought me to his home as a baby. He explained how he had been overwhelmed, how he allowed his wife to control the household, and how he had convinced himself that staying silent was the best course of action. I nodded once and told him that I would take care of his medical bills, but that was all he and his family were receiving from me. His eyes searched mine, hoping for forgiveness, but I offered none. I turned on my heel and left the room without a word.